Hello and welcome to this EduCast, Dominating Your Industry, How to Build and Execute an Industry-Dominating Strategy from VoIP Innovations and Telecom Reseller. With me today, Jason Talpochi, President of VoIP Innovations, then I'm Gary Auden, President of Delphi. As we do in every other EduCast, we talk about what we're going to talk about, so let's discuss that now. What you'll be learning about today is not so much about a particular technology, but how to become dominant in your technology area. So we start off with the questions, what's a strategy, and then how to plan. But as we go further into this, we have to ask ourselves a number of questions about our strategy. How do we execute those strategies? Connecting the strategy with our planning documents. An important point, which I think is the employee buy-in. You just don't do this by yourself. And we'll talk about an ebook that Jason has written that'll help you learn more about what we're going to discuss. So Jason, why don't you start us off with describing a strategy for us?
Sure. Well, I just want to start, Gary, by thanking you for having me on again. These are great, and they also are very educational. And what started this, Gary, was that I've been going to these leadership and growth summits called Gazelle. And at first, I didn't buy into necessarily what we're going to talk about today, but after the years go by, and I really started to buy into these strategies that we're going to talk about, and I started to notice a significant change with my company. So, we wanted to start out with, discussing what is a strategy. Why is it important? And, and these are all in my terms, too. You'll find, if you do research, you'll find a lot of different, the same stuff, but organized a different way. This is what has worked for VoIP Innovations over the past 6 years. So a strategy, I like to say a strategy is identifying and solving a market pain using a differentiating product and or service. And really the essence of that is finding a market pain and solving that pain, but not just solving it like everybody else does, but solving it differently, something unique. And your strategy is going to start with the top 4 things, which are your beliefs, your core values, your purpose, and the people. And these are things you don't make up. These are all things that who you are. So your beliefs, it defines your belief systems and is really your North Star. And then you have your core values. Those values are what guide. Those are the rules for all your employees. And you really want to hire people that match those values. And then your purpose, what you do. What is the purpose of this company? And at VoIP Innovations is to save time. And then you have to hire the right people. That's the whole key. If you hire people that match your core values, you got a leg up on any of your competitors. And then it continues with identifying the market pain, the differentiator, as we spoke about before, and then one of the most important pieces, your brand promises. What do you promise to your customers? And use VoIP Innovations as an example. We promise choice, automation, and control to VoIP resellers to save them time in their day.
One of the points I think you didn't quite make, but I think it's important, is a pain point is an opportunity, really. And can you solve that pain point and then deliver the opportunity?
Absolutely, you're 100% right. And if there is no pain, you pretty much have a business of chasing your tail. And you bring up a very good point. Identifying that pain is one of the most important factors in a successful business.
Let's move on to planning. We'll talk about strategic planning.
Okay, so strategic planning, I like to look at it as 2 parts. It's obviously strategic and planning, and I like to think of it as strategic thinking, which is a more higher, bigger picture function or task. And then there's planning, which I call it execution planning. Those are making those strategic thoughts. They're making them a reality. So going back to strategic thinking, as I said earlier, it's coming up with a big picture idea. And this is typically performed by your senior leadership team, and you tend to get together and you identify the pain, the differentiator, and how you're going to solve those pains with that differentiator. And it's very difficult. It's hard work. It's draining. You wouldn't think just thinking and brainstorming and sitting around and trying to develop your strategy would be draining, but it is, and it's time consuming. But the more you do it, the closer you'll get and the easier it becomes. And another real important thing that I want to hammer home is strategies are ever changing. If you develop a strategy this year, and you say, okay, I'm just going to run with that you will eventually, that strategy will no longer work. So it's important to always be looking at those opportunities in the marketplace and adjusting your strategy. And then the second piece to strategic planning is the execution planning. It's making these ideas a reality. And this is typically performed by your director and management level. They take what the executive team has dreamed up and where they want to go, their strategy, and they execute it. And that's where all the heavy lifting occurs. And these people tend to keep a real close eye on targets, items such as critical numbers, KPIs, or key performance indicators. The company's priorities are big rocks. So they make it happen.
I think one of the points that you're making is that a strategy has to evolve. It's not just simply static. And you're going to have to answer a whole series of questions, not just once, but multiple times. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct. And when you first look at these questions, they say, oh my gosh, this is only the first list. The next page has some more questions. It seems daunting, but some of them don't change. Some of them do change. You know, your purpose and your core values and your brand promise and your BHAG, which is your big, hairy, audacious, we'll go over that in a second. Those things typically are a little bit more static. But to your point, the sandbox and the problem and the pain, those things are a little bit more fluid. So you want to ask yourself when you're sitting down, strategically thinking about where you want to take your company, you want to ask yourself these questions here, and I'll briefly go through them. They are like, what is your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal? You know, Bill Gates said back in the early 90s, I want to put a computer in every desk in every home in the world. Now, could he really do that? And could we actually see if that was done? Probably not, but he pretty much did that and changed the way we work every day. What is our purpose? You know, we all have to have a purpose, whether it's a purpose for your company or just a purpose in your personal life. You know, how do you want to live that life? What is our brand promises? And that's important. Those are usually three things. We want to provide choice to our VoIP resellers. We want to provide automation, and we want to provide control. We do those three things. We promise those three things in order to save them time. The next one is, what are our strengths and weaknesses, and what are our opportunities and threats? This is the classic SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and we call it trends. Here I have threats. And your strengths and weaknesses, and before I go on, this is one of the most important tools of strategic thinking that you can use, which is a SWOT analysis. And what are your strengths and weaknesses are going to be your internal, there's something internal that you can control, and your opportunities or threats are going to be something external that aren't necessarily in your control. But by listing these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you pretty much build your plan by answering those four questions. What is our sandbox? Another very important. Where do you want to play? You know, I see my competitors, they'll say, well, our sandbox is the whole world. Yeah, we sell all over the world too, but my sandbox is North America. That's where we want to play. That's where we want to win. That's where we focus. Now, sure, will we take business in the rest of the world? Absolutely, but that's not where we focus. Who are we selling services to? Your buyer persona. That's the key. You got to identify who are you targeting, and you need to focus like with a laser on that particular buyer persona. What pain are we solving? We've talked about that. What is our market differentiator? We've also talked about that. And then we need to really identify your 1- and 3-year goals, starting with your 3 goals and backing down to your 1-year goals.
I have a question about that before we move to the next slide. Why is it that you didn't mention 5 years? Are a series of assumptions you make get weaker over the time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Gary. We don't do it. Typically, it's 3 to 5 years, 1, 3, and 5 years. We, in technology, especially in the telecommunications world today, it's way too fluid. We find that if we go 5 years out, it's almost an exercise in futility because things change so rapidly. So here at VoIP Innovations, we only take it out 3 years. However, if I was in a non-technical company, I would probably try to stretch it out to 5.
Let's move on to further questions, especially in the area of executing what you're doing.
Absolutely. And then in execution questions, these are going to be your director and management level. These are the questions they have to help the senior leadership team with. And for example, what is our profit per X? It's one of the most important metrics for any company to manage. And then we sell DIDs, numbers, telephone numbers. So our profit per X is profit per DID. If we can buy them for cheaper and sell them for more, we make more profit. but that comes at a cost as well. You don't want to overcharge or your customers and potentially lose. So profit per X is very important. What are your one-year priorities? That's identifying when you sit down in your strategic plan for 2 days, you got to say, this is where we want to be, and these are what we need to accomplish this year, these priorities in order to hit our financial goals. What are our quarterly priorities? You're simply taking that one-year strategy or one-year goals, priorities, and you're going to say, okay, this first quarter, we said we're going to get all this done in 1 year. This first quarter, we want to get these things done, and we hyper-focus on those particular things. At the end of that quarter, we focus on setting a new set of priorities for the second, third, and fourth quarters. Critical numbers is something that gets lost. What are your critical numbers? Ours is the total number of active DIDs that we have, and everybody from the president down to our subject matter experts, our porting people and support people, they all understand the critical number, and they all understand how they can affect it. In number porting, if they port in an extra number that we weren't going to get, that's a big win. In support, if they help save a customer that's not going to port out their telephone numbers, that's also a big win. And then you want to identify your big rocks. Big rocks are going to be in the quarter. They're going to be the big things that out of those priorities that you want to get accomplished. So if it was to add SMS text messaging capabilities to your service, it might be a big rock might be connecting with a vendor that can supply that, or building the back-end functions. And you have to assign accountability to who's accountable to see that all the way through from start to finish, and when it's going to be completed. And when it's going to be completed is going to give you that stake in the ground, something to drive against.
You mentioned the word gap in the next slide, and I'm wondering, can you first tell us why there's a gap between the two, and then how do we resolve that?
I think most companies have a executive team, and then there's everybody else. And as we just outlined, the executive team is going to build the strategy, set the core values, brand promises, purpose, and then we ask these other group of people, directors and managers, to execute that. And what I've found is that if you can close that gap, if you can include the directors, managers, and your subject matter experts or frontline employees with the strategic thinking, not only do you get a better strategy in place because they deal with your customers and vendors on a daily basis, but it also helps them to execute it more efficiently. And now the reason on this side why we have brand promises in the middle is I use brand promises as the guiding light. So when we're thinking strategy, I'm constantly reminding my staff members, remember, it's about choice, automation, and control to save time. So if we build this product, does it provide that? And then when we're executing it and deciding how we're going to build it, so we're going to build this new product, when we're building it and designing it, that execution team asks the same questions. Is this easy? If it's more than 3 steps to do something in our back office, we say that's too many. So anything you do, any action you make in the back office has to be done within 3 steps. And that's going with choice, automation, and control to save time. And so if you look at this slide here, you'll see strategic thinking. As we said, it's the executive team. To recap, it's your beliefs, values, vision, and BHAG. You're setting your buyer persona and your mind share. Your mind share is something we haven't talked about yet. And this is interesting. This is the word that you want to own. If somebody, for us, it's wholesale VoIP. We are a wholesale VoIP or VoIP wholesale. And if you go and type those words in Google, you'll see that VoIP Innovations is in the top 3 organically for those terms. When we write any blog post, or when we build a product, or we write a new content, we always keep that in mind, that our mind share is wholesale VoIP. When somebody thinks of those 2 words, we want them to think of us. And then lastly here, you have your pain differentiator and one phrase strategy. And, we talked about the pain. And you know what? I want to touch base just real quick, Gary, on the pain for VoIP Innovations. What we noticed that our buyer persona is, we call him Reseller Randy. It's a small, less than 5 people that run a little local telecommunications business and sell to the local businesses and residents. And we noticed that after a certain point, once they sell a certain amount of accounts, they get inundated with managing the accounts, changing 911, adding caller ID, bill disputes, all these other things. And they lose focus on growing their company. So when we built our back end, we said, let's make it provide choice, automation, and control that saves these people time. And so that's our one-phrase strategy targeted to our buyer persona. And so if you go below the thinking, brand promise, execution, you'll see it's execution planning next, which we had talked about being the management team. You know, they're going to watch on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis the targets, the profit per X, manage the big rocks or the company priorities, and report back to everybody on the critical numbers. So these two things, to answer your question about the gap, that's why I call it a gap.
Now, when you've talked about all of this, we're still dealing with people. And I think one of the understated points of your strategic planning is getting the employees to buy into what you're trying to do and continue their buy-in. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right. And it's fun, I have to laugh because I always say if you go to most businesses, they spend all this time to plan and to get ready to execute. But it's almost like the plan is top secret. You know, they didn't show it, the lower level employees haven't seen it. And so it's really key to include everybody. Matter of fact, you would think salary is the most motivating thing to an employee, and I think it's number 5 on the list. It's like fulfillment and being included in the loop of what's going on in the top 2. So to your point, to get buy-in, you have to align your brand promises with your critical numbers. And what I mean by that is we had touched base earlier on my porting subject matter experts. I always say, hey, you know, if you can get a couple extra ports, that does so much. It pushes us in the right direction to hit our critical numbers. And once they make that connection that, oh, gee, what I do on a daily basis can drive the revenue or the plan, it really clicks for them. So what we do to even further crystallize it in their mind is we come up with a theme. So this year it's called the communication rallying call, all right? And this year we are driving to X amount of number of active DIDs. And so what we're doing, we're going to go, we said racing to X amount of DIDs. And we came up with a celebration that's taking our staff out to go sprint kart racing and sticking with a theme. And so that's something for them to understand. Well, the critical numbers is going to be X amount of DIDs, so we're driving to that many DIDs. Anything I can do to help us get there means that we'll get to go sprint kart racing, and that's just a celebration. The important part is doing a reward at the end of the rainbow. We all work hard to get rewarded. And so, for example, at our company here at VoIP Innovations, I share the profits, X% of profits with my employees every year, and it's turned them all into mini business owners, and they're all concerned about reaching the plan and saving costs.
I think one of the things you're saying, though, is you can have a group of people that follow and you can have a director, or you can have a leader and you have a team. Is that really the function you're talking about?
That is it. And there is a great image that I found online, and it's a rock being pulled by a bunch of people with a rope, and the boss is sitting on top of the rock with a whip, and it says, this is a boss, and then it goes over and it shows next to it what a leader does. The leader is in the front pulling on the rope with the rest of the people leading them. I thought that was very interesting, and you're spot on with that.
Now, as we move on to all of this, if the planning is good, it's logical, it's reasonable, tell me about the penalties if we don't do this right.
Yeah, there's a bunch of penalties, and it depends on where you are with your business. It might be harder to get funding. If you've taken the traditional VC or angel investing route with your business, you might have a harder time getting the funding. Investor versus founder operation. You know, there's an investor versus the founder. They're treated completely different, and they look at the business completely different. Over-optimistic goals, that's something we see all the time. And as a matter of fact, we've done it before. I believe last year we said this is what we're going to do. We're going to really increase revenue by X%. And as we learned that, boy, as the company becomes bigger, it's harder to grow and steer the ship. So we had 2 aggressive goals, and we've since ratcheted them back. And so far through the month, it's only been 1 month, but we're spot on. A good idea does not mean success, and that's one I really like. There's a lot of good ideas, but it doesn't mean that your buyer persona or your target market wants that. And I've been in that trap where, boy, this sounds really great to me, but it might not necessarily translate well to my buyer persona. Incorrectly analyzing the market. That's a big one. For people, I keep an eye on my market. I have all my staff do the same thing. And we talk about it. And there has been times where we said, boy, this is going to be huge. And now that we look back, it wasn't. And if we would have realized maybe that wasn't going to be as big as we thought it was going to be, maybe we wouldn't have spent all the time. And what it comes down to is we didn't get the return on investment. So you have to really think about the market and what you're going to build for that market, so that you don't build things that just don't matter. Presenting technical rather than business solutions, and that's a good one. Technical people love to do that. Here's something. This would be great. And again, it kind of goes into a good idea does not mean success. It could be very technical and be a great idea. It doesn't mean it's a solution for the business. Promising more than can be delivered, and that's another classic one. I think we've all fallen into that trap, and it's very easy to overpromise and underdeliver, and that's something we talk about here, and we place realistic expectations. Matter of fact, we don't put time on anything. We don't estimate it's going to take X amount of days or hours or months to build a product. We group them by small, medium, and big, and we know that a small usually takes around this time. A big item takes about this time, and a medium item takes about that time. So we don't even try to estimate because we end up overpromising.
You have done a very good job producing an ebook on this subject. Would you talk about it for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been getting into more of writing. I've learned a lot over the years, and I wanted to pass it along. So I've been sitting down and forcing myself to write ebooks, and the second one I had come out was called Building an Industry Dominating Strategy. And you can learn about what strategy tools to use. So everything that we just talked about, all those questions, there'll be tools in there for them that you can use to organize everything. Where to find additional resources. So you can go research your industry, learn more about, is my brand promise correct, or are my values really my values? And I want to learn a little bit more about that. How to build your strategy in the clouds. My ebook will tell you what software to use. It's very inexpensive, so that all those questions and the forms you fill out can be done using the software up in the clouds. And it's, like I said, it's very inexpensive, and it's a great way to keep your team aligned so that everybody can see the plan and follow the plan. Matter of fact, it actually has an app for your iPhone or smartphone.
Let's talk about your company itself, because you've been awarded many times for the business you've put together and strategically planned and executed.
Oh yes, we've been blessed with building something that has been recognized, and we primarily sell, as we said, wholesale VoIP, which is DIDs, numbers, origination, inbound calling, termination, which is outbound calling, 911 services, hosted billing, and fraud. But what makes us really different is, there's a lot of people that do that sell those items. What we do is we use choice and automation and control to save them time. So we build a back office software that does that, and that's our differentiator. That's what makes us different, and we're pretty hard to replicate. And so over the past few years, we always apply for, like here in Pittsburgh, there is a fastest growing companies and best places to work in Pittsburgh and best places to work in Pennsylvania. And so we've been on those lists 4 years running now. And then the biggest honor was we've been on the Inc. 500, 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in America for the last 4 years. And so we're hoping to get it for a 5th year, and we'll find out, I guess, soon.
There's another resource that people can get to, and that's your VoIP University.
Yes. Yeah. We, as a matter of fact, Gary, I'm glad that we have this in here. Right now, the VoIP Innovations University, you can find in our back office if you're a customer. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to open that up to put it on our actual marketing website. So if you're not a customer, you can still have access to all of our ebooks, white papers, podcasts. Right now, you can see our videos on our YouTube channel, and our blog is one of the most well-known blogs in the VoIP industry, and we try to provide as much learning content as possible.
I want to point out that there are many other industry resources. There's half a dozen here that you might go after. And contact information. Corey Potts is VP of Sales for VoIP Innovations. I thank you very much, Jason. I think a lot of people learned really good information in this Educast. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Gary.